Hello everyone. In the previous lecture, we started talking about mixed methods research. We mentioned that mixed method research can be considered by some researchers as the third methodological orientation other than quantitative and qualitative research. We also talked about how to plan your mixed method research. What are the questions that researchers need to take into account when planning to do a mixed method research. We also talked about several reasons as why to use mixed method research. For example, we mentioned that mixed method research can be used to offset weaknesses of one method and capitalize on the strengths or take advantage of the strengths of other method to compensate or to offset this particular weakness of this particular research method. We also talked about notation of mixed method research, and also we started talking about classification or types of mixed method research design, and we mentioned that this classification based on the timing of execution or timing of implementation of research studies, whether we started with whether it's sequential, which means starting by quantitative followed by qualitative, or qualitative followed by quantitative, or concurrent means conducting both type of both studies simultaneously or in the same time. We started talking about sequential explanatory design, whereby we start with the quantitative phase followed by qualitative phase to elaborate on the findings of the quantitative phase. In this lecture, we will keep talking or continue talking about the other designs of mixed method research, and we will start with sequential exploratory design, which starts by the qualitative phase followed by a quantitative phase, in contrast to the sequential explanatory design that we have started in the previous lecture. So before we continue talking about sequential exploratory design, we need to understand an important concept in mixed method research, which is data integration. As you can see here in the slide, there's something called continuum of integration, which means the extent to which both methods, quantitative and qualitative methods in mixed method research, are related to each other is or varies. At one end of the continuum, there are component designs in which integration occurs only during data analysis and interpretation. Component designs offer minimal integration. At the other end of the continuum, there are integrated designs in which integration is built into the entire design structure. And the integrated designs offer maximum integration. In general, the integration factor gets at the question of why you are using mixed method research approach. So it's important to answer this question before selecting a type of design. Doing so will lead you to the best design option. For example, if your goal is to use qualitative findings to inform the construction of a quantitative survey. So as you will see in this lecture, this is the main essence of sequential exploratory design, mixed method research. One form that integration may take place. This the main goal of this study, as we mentioned, is to use the qualitative findings to inform development or construction of a quantitative survey. So this goal will lead you to a particular design in which the qualitative phase of research occurs before the quantitative phase. So, knowing and understanding your intent in selecting a mixed method approach, that is identifying the relationship you seek between the quantitative and the qualitative aspects, will lead you to the most appropriate design option. So, according to John Criswell, there are 4 types of integration in mixed data integration in mixed method research. Firstly, we have merging the data, explaining the data, building the data, and embedding the data. You will be familiar with all of these while we are discussing various types of mixed method research design. So, for example, merging the data means the quantitative and the qualitative results are brought together and compared to each other. Explaining the data, the qualitative data are used to explain the results of the quantitative data. Building the data, the qualitative findings are used to build the quantitative phase of the study, which let's say is mainly related to sequential exploratory study that we will discuss in this lecture. And embedding the data, by which one set of data is used to support the other set of data, and we will also discuss this issue throughout this lecture. So, as we mentioned, we will start with the sequential exploratory design. As you can see here in the slide, the sequential exploratory design, the notation of this type of design is started by qual, which means the qualitative data, then arrow indicates to sequential, to quantitative data. And as you can see, qual was written as in uppercase letters, which means that the priority or dominance in addressing the research aims or answering the research questions in such type of study is given to the qualitative component or qualitative phase in the sequential exploratory design. Similar to sequential explanatory design, as we mentioned in the previous lecture, alternatively it can be called as explanatory design. Similarly here, sequential exploratory design can be called as exploratory design. So again, viewing the study as a two-phase project, as we mentioned, used often to explore a phenomenon, identify themes, and or design an instrument. So this is an important element in the sequential exploratory design, whereby the researcher can perform a qualitative phase or a qualitative component to explore a particular phenomenon, and according to the findings from the qualitative phase, the researcher can identify the main themes, let's say, around this phenomenon, and can help the researcher to develop an instrument, to develop a tool, or let's say a survey questionnaire to investigate this phenomenon quantitatively. So this is an important element you need to be aware of regarding sequential exploratory design. So as we mentioned, in an exploratory design, qualitative data is first collected and analyzed using the methods that we have covered throughout this course. For example, in regarding to data collection, for example, performing a qualitative research using a focus group, or using an observation, or using an one-to-one interviews, and analyze it, let's say, using thematic analysis. The themes that are developed based on the qualitative phase or qualitative component are used to drive the development of a quantitative instrument to further explore the research problem in a quantitative manner, as we have mentioned. So again, greater the concentration or the focus or the primary method or the dominant method, let's say, and sequential exploratory design is given to the qualitative component or qualitative phase. Again, as we mentioned in the previous lecture, one of the key elements in mixed method research is data linkage or data integration, comparing, let's say, and contrasting the findings from quantitative and qualitative phase. So again, integration of both quantitative finding and the qualitative finding take place at the data interpretation stage. So again, we need to emphasize on the point that of instrument development or quantitative instrument development using sequential exploratory design. So in exploratory studies where the concepts, variables, and relationships among them are mostly unclear, greater priority is often assigned to qualitative elements that uncover the pool of variables and relationships among them that may be subsequently studied quantitatively. So now we will talk about data collection procedures and sequential exploratory design. In this strategy, the data collection would occur in two phases, as we mentioned, with the initial qualitative data collection followed by the second quantitative data collection. The challenge is how to use the information from the initial phase in the second phase. There are several options. The qualitative data analysis can be used to develop an instrument with good psychometric properties, such as good validity and good reliability. As you all know, the qualitative data analysis will yield codes and themes. The development of an instrument can proceed by using the codes to write items for an instrument, the codes to develop variables that group the items, and the themes that group the codes into scales. This is a useful procedure for moving from the qualitative data analysis to scale development. So, developing a good psychometric instrument that fits the sample and population under study is not the only use of this design. The researcher also can use this design, just sequential exploratory design, to analyze the qualitative data to develop new variables that will be explored further in a quantitative phase. An important issue or an important aspect in this context is if the sample for the qualitative phase is the same for the quantitative phase. This cannot be because the qualitative sample is typically much smaller than a quantitative sample needed to generalize from a sample to a population. So sometimes mixed method researcher will use entirely different samples for the qualitative and the quantitative components of the study. However, a good practice or good procedure in mixed method designs is to draw both samples from the same population, but to make sure that the individuals for both samples are not the same. To have individuals help develop an instrument and then to survey them in the quantitative phase would introduce confounding factors into the study. In the previous slide, we talked about data collection procedures and sequential exploratory design. Now we will talk about the data analysis procedures and the sequential exploratory mixed method design. In this strategy, the researcher analyzes the two databases separately and uses the findings from the initial exploratory database to build into quantitative measures. So, as we mentioned, in sequential exploratory design, the researcher collects both quantitative and qualitative data. Those data need to be analyzed separately or individually. and use the findings from the initial exploratory database, a qualitative database, to build into quantitative measures or tools. This means that the researcher needs to pay careful attention to the qualitative data analysis steps and determine what findings to build on. If, let's say, for example, the researcher uses grounded theory in the qualitative phase of the sequential exploratory design, the theoretical model or the theory generated from the grounded theory may provide a model to be tested in the second quantitative phase. Another example, let's say, the researcher conducts in the first phase in the sequential exploratory design a qualitative case study. This qualitative case study can yield different cases that become the focus on important variables in the second quantitative phase. So this is the main essence or main idea of the sequential exploratory design. So far the researcher finishes data collection, procedures, data analysis. Now we come to the interpretation stage. Usually our researchers interpret the mixed method results in a discussion section of a study. And sequential exploratory design, the order of interpretation is to first report the qualitative findings, the use of the qualitative results for the development of an instrument, for example, and then the quantitative results of the final phase of the study. In this aspect, it's important to mention it does not make sense in this sequential exploratory design to compare the two databases, because typically they are drawn from different samples, and the intent of strategy here is to determine if the qualitative themes can be generalized to a larger sample in a quantitative phase of this study. So in this slide you can see an example on sequential exploratory design. For example, a researcher may conduct a focus group of special education teachers to generate discussion of perceived barriers to implementing speech and language services in the schools. This is the qual component, followed by a quantitative component by using the ideas generated in the focus group. In this way, a large-scale survey might be sent to all the teachers in a district, asking them to rate the impact of predetermined barriers. So to study those barriers in a quantitative manner. So another example on sequential exploratory study, a study sought to understand the motivating and inhibiting factors to physical activity and exercise in people after spinal cord injury, and to develop, test, and implement a survey tool that examines self-reported physical activity after spinal cord injury and its relationship with secondary conditions. So the researchers performed qualitative phase, or they start exploring this issue by performing a qualitative exploratory data collection, preceded the quantitative study component. So in this case, the study design was sequential exploratory design. The focus group specifically explored barriers and facilitators of exercise. Understanding these factors was critical to inform development of the survey tool, which included items on chronic and secondary conditions, health risk behaviors, hospital and healthcare utilization, physical functioning, exercise activities and patterns, rehabilitative therapy, wheelchair use, and community integration. So far we finished talking about sequential explanatory design and sequential exploratory design, mixed method research design. Now we will talk about a third type of the sequential mixed method designs, which is sequential transformative design. Again, it's a sequential type of design whereby quantitative is followed by qualitative, or qualitative followed by quantitative. So here and this type, either type of data, whether qualitative or quantitative, can be collected first, as you can see in the figure here. So both types of methods are combined in this design, what's important here, or what's different from previous designs, that here the researcher use what we call a theoretical perspective to guide the study, which is sometimes it's called transformative framework. That's why it's called sequential transformative design. So the purpose is to use the methods that best serve the theoretical perspective of the researcher, and after separate analysis of the qualitative and the quantitative data, integration of outcomes will take place during the interpretation phase. So we continue talking about sequential transformative design. In this design, the researcher uses a theoretical based framework. So it's an important consideration to be aware that one of the important characteristics of sequential transformative design is the use of theoretical based framework to advance needs of underrepresented or marginalized population. Okay, so sometimes in some text box they call this population as vulnerable population. For example, as you can see, such as women, people with disabilities, racial and ethnic minorities, and religious minorities as well. So in this aspect, this design, which is a sequential transformative design, seeks to address issues of social justice and call for change by means of the theoretical framework that is used in this design. So the strength of sequential transformative design, that it's very straightforward in terms of implementation and reporting. However, it's time consuming and there is little guidance due to the relative lack of literature on the transformative nature of moving from the first phase of data collection to the second. So on this slide, we can see like an example on sequential transformative mixed method design. A sequential transformative study was conducted to examine the cultural influences on mental health problems. The study commenced with a quantitative telephone survey of the community, which included the general health questionnaire. Then the quantitative phase of the study was followed by qualitative interviews, which were theoretically driven. These interviews enabled the researchers to explore the cultural health experiences related to the non-use of mental health facilities by Vietnamese and West Indian participants living in an urban area of Montreal. So this is only an example of how you can apply what we have learned about sequential transformative design. So in this study, which sought to examine the cultural influences on mental health problems, the researcher here started with a quantitative phase, or the quantitative component. Then this quantitative component was followed by qualitative interviews, and these qualitative interviews were theoretically driven. So the main idea here is the use of theoretical framework, which is the main idea, or the main essence of sequential transformative design, is the use of theoretical or theoretical lens or theoretical framework in the research. So, so far we finished, let's say, the first family of mixed method research, which is the sequential mixed method design family, which means that both phases or qualitative and the quantitative phase are performed sequentially, one after the other. We talked about sequential explanatory design. We also talked about sequential exploratory design and sequential transformative design. We talked about the main uses of these, the timing of implementation of two components, whether the study starts by qualitative or a quantitative phase. And we also talked about or mentioned some examples of studies that have used those three designs. Now we will start with the second family of mixed method research, which is concurrent design. Concurrent means that both quantitative and qualitative phase are performed simultaneously. So as you see here, we will start with a concurrent triangulation design. In this case, the quantitative and the qualitative data are collected simultaneously, and as you can see, priority is usually equal and given to both forms of data. As we mentioned in the previous slides, we talked about priority or dominance, or priority in answering research aims or addressing the research questions. In your mixed method study, we mentioned that if quan or qual is written as like uppercase letters, that means that the priority for the phase that is written in uppercase letter. In this figure, as you can see, in concurrent triangulation design, the quan and the qual, both of them are written in uppercase letter, which means that priority is usually in this design equal and given to both forms of data. And the results of both type of data are then integrated in the final interpretation. So the main idea here that both qual and the quan data are collected in the same time. So merging of a quan and the qual results in concurrent triangulation design takes place during the analysis and interpretation to provide an integrated conclusion and involves comparing, contrasting, and synthesizing of the two strands. Okay, so this is an important idea in concurrent triangulation design, where the interpretation can include comparing, contrasting, and synthesizing of the two strands of data, both qualitative and the quantitative data. And also, again, we want to stress on a point that both quan and qual have the same priority in concurrent triangulation design. So continue talking about concurrent triangulation design. It's used when the researcher wants to validate quantitative findings with qualitative data. So we can collect, in this case, quantitative and qualitative data concurrently or simultaneously within the same time. One of the most important advantages or benefits for concurrent triangulation design clearly is that as the data in this design is collected simultaneously, this means that it helps to decrease the implementation time. So it's particularly useful for decreasing the implementation time when there's not enough time to conduct your study, and you can, in this case, follow the concurrent triangulation design, which is also can be called in the literature as parallel. So a parallel term can be used to define the concurrent approach in the literature. So in this case, it can be called as a parallel triangulation design, which is the same as concurrent triangulation design, which means that both quantitative data and the qualitative data are collected simultaneously or concurrently. So again, data collection priority is equal for quantitative and qualitative phases and concurrent triangulation design. Regarding the sequence or time of implementation, there is concurrent collection of quantitative and qualitative data. And regarding the use of data, as we mentioned, it's used to compare similar or dissimilar, or to compare and contrast between quantitative findings and qualitative findings in this type of study. So similar to what we did in sequential transformative design, sequential exploratory design, and sequential explanatory design, we mentioned some examples from the literatures to explain the idea and to apply what we have learned about these methods and about the procedures of performing these methods and how it can be applied in practice in research. So here you can see an example on concurrent triangulation design. Or parallel triangulation design, as we mentioned. So this is a longitudinal study of maternal and child well-being, whereby the researcher performed semi-structured in-depth interviews with mothers and collected quantitative data using several validated scales at the same home visit. The researchers and this study identified numerous family stressors in the interview. So based on the interviews that have been performed with the participants in this study, numerous family stressors have been identified, which were incorporated in the quantitative maternal stress index scales. Similarly, the objective measures, which is Edinburgh postnatal depression scale, addressing emotional well-being that indicated a high level of maternal depression, were supported by findings from the interviews in which mothers reported low energy levels, despondency, and anxiety attacks. So the authors in this study note that concurrent use of qualitative and quantitative measures adds to the depth and scope of findings. So as we mentioned, one of the most important uses for concurrent triangulation design is to compare and contrast, also to add to the depth and scope of findings from both phases, from quantitative and qualitative phase. So now we come to the second type of design in the concurrent mixed method design family, which is the concurrent embedded or nested design. The concurrent design, it means that both types of data, qualitative data and the quantitative data, are collected simultaneously or concurrently. So now, what is the meaning of embedded nested design? Keep in mind also that embedded or nested design also can be sequential, can be also concurrent. So in this example, we are talking about concurrent embedded nested design, whereby both types of data, quantitative and qualitative data, are collected simultaneously or concurrently. However, in this type of design, the priority is usually unequal and given to one of the two forms of data, either to quantitative or qualitative data. In this case, both types of data are collected simultaneously, but one of the two methods is embedded in the other in a way that allows the researcher to address a question that's different from the one answered by the dominant method. So you have one method embedded in the other, and this method can be used to address a research question that's different from the research question that has been addressed or that's intended to be addressed by the dominant research method. And the integration of data in this case occurs in the analysis phase. So in general, we are talking about embedded or nested design or embedded mixed method design. It means that it nests one or more forms of data, whether quantitative or qualitative, within a larger design. For example, within a narrative study, an ethnography, or an experiment. Let's take experiment an example. We are talking now about embedded or nested design in general. Let's take, as we mentioned, the experiment as an example. So the researcher can collect qualitative data and collected during the experiment, which now can be called as convergent, or before the experiment begins. In this case, it will be sequential, or after the experiment ends. In this case as well, it can be called as sequential. So this embedded or nested design is a popular design within the health sciences, and when researchers test an intervention or program in an applied setting. So regarding concurrent embedded or nested design, the primary purpose is for gaining a broader perspective than could be gained from using only the predominant data collection method. As we mentioned, we have one dominant method, which could be quantitative or qualitative. This dominant method answered a research question, and we use another method or embedded method to address different research questions. So this is the main essence of concurrent embedded or nested design, or let's say embedded or nested design. As we mentioned, it could be concurrent, it could be sequential as well. So similar to what we did in previous mixed method designs, now we will take an example regarding concurrent nested embedded design. Again, as we mentioned, the main idea or the main essence of concurrent embedded or nested design is that you have primary method and you have secondary method, and you embedded or nested this secondary method within the primary method to address a different research question from the research question that has been addressed by the primary method or the dominant method. This is an example of a study that was conducted, or a concurrent nested design study, mixed method design study, to explore eating related distress of advanced male cancer patients and their female partners. Here the researchers, as we mentioned, utilized concurrent nested design, whereby the primary method used in this study was focus group. So the primary method, let's say, or the dominant method is the qual method. These focus groups were attended by patients and their partners with the conduct of these groups and the analysis of the data based on grounded theory, which is the qualitative technique. So the primary method, as we mentioned in this study, or the dominance or the priority in this study was given to the qual component or qual part of this mixed method embedded design or nested design. The secondary or nested focus of the study was the differences in patients and their partners' assessment of the intensity and symptoms and the degree of cachexia related symptoms of eating related disorders of patients. This secondary information was collected by a structured questionnaire which was completed at the time of the first focus group. So as you can see, we have primary method and secondary method. Primary method addressed a particular aim or a particular objective or a particular research question. The second phase or the second component is to address another question. So it was nested or embedded within the first method or within the primary method. Okay, so the eating related distress differed for patients and their partners as indicated in the qualitative findings, and this was complemented by the quantitative findings. So this is an example of how you can apply what we have mentioned or learned in theory in practice, and how you can perform or to see how the researchers can use those designs in their studies. Now we come to the third type of concurrent mixed method design, which is concurrent transformative design. Similar to sequential transformative design, this design is guided by theoretical perspective of change or theoretical lens. And you can see concurrent collection of both quantitative and qualitative data. So similar to sequential transformative designs that we have discussed previously, these designs are useful for giving voice to diverse or alternative perspectives, advocating for research participants, and better understanding of a phenomenon that may be changing as a result of being studied. So it's in a call for action. It's used to a phenomenon that needs a call for action. Aims to address social issues faced by a group of people also. So this is why it's called sometimes as transformative, because it needs to transform particular thing using this type of study and using the theoretical perspective of change. And usually you can see in the literature that's the use of what we call advocacy worldview in such type of studies. Table, you can see a summary to what we have discussed regarding different types of mixed method research design. You can see reasons for choosing mixed methods, what are the expected outcomes, and what is the recommended mixed method design. Firstly, when you want to compare different perspectives drawn from quantitative and qualitative data, so you merge the two databases to show how the data convergent or diverge from each other. So in this case, you use convergent parallel mixed method design. Secondly, you want to explain quantitative results with the qualitative data. So a more in-depth understanding of the quantitative, you use in this case explanatory sequential mixed method design. Developing pattern measurement instruments. So the expected outcomes is a test of pattern measures for a sample of a population. In this case, as we discussed, exploratory sequential mixed method design. Understanding experimental results by incorporating perspectives of individuals. This is an example that we have mentioned. The expected outcomes, as you can see, an understanding of participant views within the context of an experimental intervention. You can use, in this case, embedded or nested mixed method design, and developing an understanding of needed changes for a marginalized group. This is the main idea of sequential transformative mixed method design in general, where you use it for a marginalized people, as we mentioned, vulnerable population or underrepresented population, and the expected outcomes is a call for action. That's why it's called transformative, and you use a theoretical perspective or theoretical lens throughout this type of mixed method design study. So far, we finished talking in this lecture and in the previous lecture about definitions of mixed method designs, the philosophical background or philosophical foundation in mixed method research. We also talked about some reasons for why researchers use mixed method research designs. We also talked about the types of mixed method design, and we mentioned that we have two families: sequential, whereby the researcher conduct first phase followed by the second phase, and the concurrent, where the researcher collect both quantitative and qualitative data simultaneously or in the same time. Now we will talk about some issues regarding design of mixed method research. For example, let's talk about research questions and mixed method research. So research questions is an important and basic aspect in every type of research. So how to write your research questions in mixed method research? You need to think about order of data collection. As we mentioned, we have in mixed method research design, we have sequential, mixed method research design, and concurrent. So if sequential, ask first question first, second. So ask first question whether it's qualitative first, the second question if it's quantitative, the second. If you have a concurrent mixed method design, or let's say as parallel, as we mentioned, ask questions based on weight or importance or dominant, let's say. So if equine, more heavily weighted in your concurrent design, start with a quantitative research hypothesis. If equal, more heavily weighted, start with equal research questions. So this is how you think when you start to design and plan to do your mixed method research, and you need to write your research questions similar to any type of research, whether it's quantitative alone or qualitative alone. So ask yourself about timing of implementation of of both phases. If you are doing sequential, so ask the first phase, or ask a question related to the first phase first, and ask the question that's related to the second phase second. If you are using simultaneous or concurrent mixed method design, you are now looking at the weight or the importance. So if your study is given the quantitative component is heavily weighted or it's more dominant, so you ask the quantitative question first, and then you ask the qualitative question second if it's not given the priority in the same study. So, regarding data analysis in mixed method research, it's unusual for qualitative and quantitative data to be analyzed together. So typically we use analytic methods appropriate to our data collection strategy. So similar to what you have learned regarding quantitative phase and regarding what you have learned about the qualitative phase. So you use what you have learned in both strategies to analyze the data separately or individually. Each of these analyses must meet standards of rigor specific to the overall approach. So the key is actually how we use each form of analysis and integrate our interpretation of our analysis. So as we mentioned in the beginning of this lecture, we are talking about integration or data linkage of both types of data, which is the main essence of mixed method research, whereby the researcher integrate the findings from both types of data in the discussion section of the study. Now, what are the advantages of mixed method research? There are several advantages and for mixed method research. Firstly, it compares quantitative and qualitative data. So mixed methods are especially useful in understanding contradictions between quantitative and qualitative results. Secondly, it reflects participants' point of view. So mixed methods give a voice to study participants and ensure that study findings are grounded in participants' experiences. Thirdly, it fosters or enhances scholarly interaction. So mixed method studies add breadth to multidisciplinary team research by encouraging the interaction of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method scholars or researchers. Also, mixed method research provides methodological flexibility. So mixed methods have great flexibility and are adaptable to many study designs, such as observational studies and randomized trials, to elucidate more information than can be obtained in only quantitative research. So providing methodological flexibility is an important advantage for mixed method research. Also, using mixed method research, researchers can collect rich and comprehensive data. So mixed methods mirror the way individuals naturally collect information by integrating quantitative and qualitative data. For example, let's take sports stories frequently integrate quantitative data, such as, for example, scores or number of errors, with qualitative data, descriptions and images of some highlights, to provide a more complete story than either method would alone. As we mentioned in the previous slide regarding advantages of mixed method research, we mentioned that words, pictures, and narrative can be used to add meaning to numbers, and numbers can be used to add precision to words, pictures, and narratives. What are the weaknesses or challenges or limitations of mixed method research? Firstly, a researcher has to learn about multiple methods and approaches and to understand how to mix them in an appropriate manner. Secondly, methodological purist, content that one should always work within either a qualitative or quantitative paradigm. Thirdly, mixed method research can be difficult for a single researcher to perform, especially if the two approaches are expected to be used simultaneously. And mixed method research is more expensive and more time consuming and needs more resources than either quantitative or qualitative research. And also there is a little guidance on transformative methods in the literature, so there's a little literature or little guidance from the literature on how to perform, on how to conduct those transformative mixed method research designs. So these are the references that have been used to prepare this lecture. Also, these are the rest of the references that have been used to prepare this lecture. In this lecture, we finished talking about mixed method research that we have started in the previous lecture. We also talked about the research questions in mixed method research. We also talk about strengths or advantages of mixed method research and limitations or challenges of mixed method research. I hope this lecture was interesting. Thank you.